Welcome to Dynasty Life. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. And this is sort of like the peak Dynasty season. This is NFL draft ends. We're into our rookie drafts. For anybody who participates in sort of this thing of ours, this is like prime time. This is the time you get after it. So this week I'm loading it up. I had Scott Barrett on with my final show before the NFL draft, and now I'm bringing in Scott Boulanger, and I'm bringing in Scott Connor. I'm going Scott. Straight Scots, not by design, but they're all really sharp dudes. And anybody who's watched Dynasty Life has now seen Jax Falcone, aka Scott Boulanger, on here many times because he's not only one of the sharpest guys in Dynasty, also a good friend of mine, and we're always sort of down to support each other's shows. I had to get you on this week. Because this week it's time for us to win our Dynasty drafts. And I think that there's every single show, I'm sure you guys are hitting it. I know we did in the Sonic Truth yesterday. We did a really, really fun mock draft show. You spend so much time, and I smoked him in that.
I know, but that's unfair. Against two absolute. They're not fantasy players. They're just guys who can talk on the radio. That's all.
Come on,
you're the real deal.
I'm in the streets. I'm in the streets earning.
They're outmatched.
So I dominated the Sonic Truth draft, but at the end of the day, you spend a great majority of that show talking about picks 1 through 8 in Superflex, and that's like I said to you, I don't want to talk about those picks at all. I want to help people win their Dynasty drafts, and I think we're going to concentrate today on picks 9 through 12, which are giving a lot of people pause. And then we're going to talk about our favorite second round targets. And, if you were listening last year, like we talked a lot, you were big on Sam Laporta. I ended up with a ton of Sam Laporta, not because I had him as tight end one in the class, just because he was cheaper than Dalton Kincaid. Now I have all these Sam Laporta rostered teams, plenty of Kincaid as well. But like Laporta, Devon Achane, Jaden Reed, there was countless players that fell to the second round that were provided tremendous returns on investment. And it's going to be that way again this year. Second round picks are always sort of underrated. So we're going to dive into that. But before we start talking about anything, you're sort of synonymous with, so if anybody is living under a rock in Dynasty, Jax is with the Undroppables. Yeah. And then his show, The Undrafted, is one of the best Dynasty podcasts out there. And hopefully it's in your weekly rotation. You can find it right here on Player Profiler, where you find Dynasty Life sort of on our main podcast feed. But you also are sort of synonymous with the Anatomy of series. And that's something you did yourself years ago, where, you basically found these bullet points that sort of check off points for running backs and quarterbacks and wide receivers. Yeah. And now you've kind of dipped your toe in like the tight end streets, but that's kind of what you're known for. And it's always fire. It's great when you do it, but you sort of collaborated with, you got a lot of sharp people now over at the Undroppables. Shout out to Chalk. Shout out to Michael P. Duncan. Shout out to all these guys who are just doing it for you. You guys put together this really cool UN score. Why don't you tell everybody what that is and where they can find it?
Yeah, so I've never claimed to be. Thank you, by the way. I've never claimed to be any sort of genius when it comes to, regression models and things of this nature. And I used to make fun of guys who would say they had a model, and look, if you're going to have a model, it's really something that you have to be, sure is kind of, peer reviewed. In other words, if you share it with someone, they're like, this is garbage. Well, then it's not really a model. It's just a bunch of bullshit. So ultimately at the end of the day, we brought in, coder, Jay Wood, who, really kind of knows how to build these things. And then we used myself, Chalk and Wiz, to kind of put some of the things that we thought were predictive into the model. And he sort of was the one who could build it also. Long story short is we did make a wide receiver model. We back tested it through 2018. We released all of the data for $20 on our website. You can just go there and pay the $20 and you get all of it. What was cool for us was actually looking back at where guys would fall. If we had the model last year, Tank Dell and Puka Nacua were in the top 5. So it's not to say that the model is what you should do in terms of draft order. That's not what it's saying. It's just sort of showing you, projected range of outcomes for these players, and maybe not getting too high on someone, or maybe being a little bit higher on a guy like Puka and Tank Dell based off of the model. That doesn't mean you're going to draft them in the first round of the rookie draft when they're round 4. guys, right? I mean, if Puka's going in round 4, maybe you reach at the end of round 3, so to speak. That would have been what the model had told you to do. So we're using the model in those ways, and it's a pretty cool tool. So I recommend everybody go check it out and fucking fire back at us. Tell us what you don't like about it, or ask us questions. We're an open book about it.
Well, I'm gonna pry you here. Give us a little taste. Give us one player that popped up in this model, good or bad, your choice, in this rookie class.
Well,
just
see, now you said good or bad, so
yeah, you can go either way here.
You tell me whether you want to hear a good one or a bad one.
Well, I think that anybody who follows you or Chalk knows about a couple of guys that you like. Why don't we talk about a guy that maybe the model is telling people to fade, and maybe could share a historical fade as well, just to show that the model is actually picking up on some of these guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the one that was surprising a little bit was Ricky Pearsall, who it doesn't like at all, and I kind of like. So it's kind of it's a tough one for me. This is really where it tests your convictions and what you believe and what you think. And look, at the end of the day, the model has missed a couple of players that were good, most notably DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin. But by and large, most of the ones that has faded, at cost was Jalen Reagor and Quentin Johnston, N'Keal Harry. All these guys was just you would have never drafted them if you had any inclination to follow what the model was telling you. You would have faded every single one of those guys. And so when I see Ricky Pearsall as low as he is, it is a little bit cause for concern, because there are a lot of other players, Roman Wilsons and players like that are much higher in the model that are going to be, in similar draft spots. So it's going to be interesting, because I don't want to just, we even don't, in our introduction to the model, we don't say, hey, this is what you should do. Just follow this and do it. No. This is another bit of data to add to your process, not the process.
No, very, very cool. I can't wait to check it out. I'm actually going to probably check it out later today, because I have a great deal of respect for what you guys put together over there. And anybody who wants to find my rookie rankings, as well as, the combined Jax and Chalk rookie rankings, we're doing a big update for the rookie guide. We're going to have something up by the end of the week, as soon as they can kind of load it in. So you get my rankings, Matty Kiwum's rankings, Cody Carpentier's rankings, John Lobb's rankings, and then our friends at the Undroppables, Jackson Chalk on that one.
We do. We actually do our individual rankings, and we give you our consensus rankings. So actually, it's kind of cool. We just do the Chalk Jax consensus. So if we disagree, we split the difference. We just basically, again, use consensus between the two of us. That's what we send you. So that's a pretty cool one that you can have. I gotta
have Chalk on Dynasty Life soon. I really want to chop it up with him. But this week, me and you, we got to figure this out, because people need to win their rookie drafts. And I think that, let me ask you this, is there a better way of accumulating talent in Dynasty than rookie draft picks? Because you get a lot of people this time of year that want to walk around saying how smart they are for trading the unknown for the known commodity. And I always think it's sort of a not necessarily a cowardly way, but it's so risk averse that you're really missing out on potentially building a long-term, impossible to beat dynasty roster. Like let's put it like this: could I flip the 108 for Michael Pittman Jr.? Sure, but at the end of the day, I know what Michael Pittman Jr. is. It's the ability to kind of, and that's sort of a bad example, but in the royal sense, these guys that are kind of known commodities that have a couple of years on them, that are sort of locked into, let's say, wide receiver 15 in Dynasty. I can flip it. That manager is probably like, okay, I'm going to take a chance on it. But you walk away feeling like, hey, I got Michael Pittman Jr. A lot of times that comes back to burn you. What is your general take on this?
Yeah, I think I did that actually. I sold a late first before the playoffs last year, before the fantasy playoffs, for Michael Pittman. For that reason, though, because I was also, he could score points for me in the playoffs. I won that Super Bowl, so different answer. But I thought Michael Pittman was a great buy for a late first. It's funny too, because the one thing, and you'll love this, Theo, because you've been doing this long enough to know this is true. Every year pre-draft, we think we have it all figured out, and we say, oh, there's a tier of this or that. And then the draft happens, and the tiers are fucking different. Brock Bowers gets nuked by a landing spot. Odunze, great landing spot, but not necessarily as good as we like year one. And then Bo Nix, he's going to be a starting quarterback. And Xavier Worthy goes to Kansas City. So instead of a 7-man tier, all of a sudden it's a 10-man tier maybe, or whatever the case might be. So I think these things always change. So the value of the 110 went down, then way back up. The 110 is way more valuable today than it was pre-draft for sure. And I think that's what I've been preaching so much is there's never a time that your pick will be more valuable than when it's on the clock. Like, and I know people say, well, on the clock, exactly on the clock. It's like figuratively on the clock. In other words, maybe on the actual clock, like when you're about to pick, but certainly right before your rookie draft, when everybody's like, wait, we draft today? Your pick just is worth the most amount at that moment, because now people want to draft. You know, they're like, I want Xavier Worthy or whomever the fuck it is. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, I think right now is maybe a bad time to do that because you're maybe seeding value. But you're absolutely right, too. You know what you're getting in Michael Pittman. Odunze could be a bust. It's possible, not likely, but possible. Pittman's not going to bust. He's been getting 150 targets a year for 4 years or whatever the case is. So, you know, if you're trying to limit, you know, like you say, upside and risk, yeah, maybe trading him for an established player, but also understanding those values. And I think that's what Chalk and I are doing. We're in a startup right now, and that startup includes all the rookies. And it's interesting because now you have to make decisions. Do you want to take Jaden Daniels or Brock Purdy? You go ahead and decide, bro. Like, you know, so now you start to really think about where that value is and what those players are worth.
On the record, give me some Jaden Daniels there.
There we go.
So let's talk about let's stay with that. What was your favorite landing spot? Either a player you were into or a player that maybe rose up your rankings because they landed so well and now you're maybe more open to them or more open to taking them higher.
I've got a couple of players. Number one, JJ McCarthy. I think he absolutely lands great. We may talk more about JJ McCarthy. I'd like to, but the other player is Roman Wilson. You know, that's a wide receiver depth chart that doesn't have much on it. And it's been wide receiver U for years and years. I mean, so the track record of the Pittsburgh Steelers drafting and developing wide receivers has been impeccable. He goes to a depth chart where he's got opportunity to probably play even in, well, certainly in 3 wide receiver sets, maybe even in 2 wide receiver sets, potentially out the gate. That's in the cards. I mean, he's certainly not going to be the number one target there, but boy, oh boy, I can tell you could do a lot worse than where Roman Wilson landed. And if you liked him pre-draft, you certainly got to like him post-draft. If you weren't sure, he becomes a little bit more interesting now that he's with the Steelers in that organization.
I love that you said Roman Wilson. He's certainly one that landed exceptionally well. And we've also seen sort of a run on Senior Bowl players, guys who perform well at the Senior Bowl. Then it correlates to NFL success. You know, you saw last year Tank Dell drafted in the 3rd round after a strong Senior Bowl. Now Roman Wilson drafted in the 3rd round, steps into, like you said, a situation where he could conceivably be the number 2 target on Pittsburgh. Love that spot. I'll say for me, you talked about him a little bit earlier, like Xavier Worthy. Everybody knows how bullish I am on Xavier Worthy. That's low-hanging fruit. But I'm glad you said Bo Nix, because it's literally the best landing spot for Bo Nix. Forget about draft capital, but like this is a Sean Payton offense.
I said JJ McCarthy, but I said Bo Nix earlier. Maybe, I don't know.
You said you meant
earlier.
JJ. Well,
I dropped his name.
JJ's the tier above, so we don't. You know, JJ of course lands wonderfully. Like Minnesota, that's arguably the best one. But Bo Nix was a guy that I never thought I would consider in a superflex rookie first round. Now he's right there because this is a guy that Sean Payton's basically banking his future in Denver on this pick. He needs Bo Nix to be successful. So they're sort of tied hand in hand. You've seen, and in terms of like a Sean Payton values accuracy, you've seen all those years with Drew Brees. Now, certainly he's not a Drew Brees, but in terms of like the low ADOT throws, I think that they're going to design a scheme around what Nix can do. And Nix also has had some rushing production in college. Like certainly 2 years ago, he had the big rushing touchdown season. I'm not even going to try Oregon. I always pronounce Oregon. Oregon.
Yeah.
Like the organs in your body. That's how people there wanted me to say it. So at Oregon, this is a guy that's going to have no pressure at all in terms of like starting. So for me, it's Bo Nix has short-term utility, and then if he hits, he hits. But at least with him, I have a chance to gain dynasty value right away. It's as good a landing spot as you can ask for with him and Peyton.
That's right. With Bo Nix, the reason for drafting Bo Nix ahead of Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas and all the rest of it is immediate value. You look, if Brian Thomas and Xavier Worthy all of a sudden are just, hey, getting a couple targets, 3-4 targets, having not doing much, and Bo Nix is out there being average, but he's throwing a touchdown or two and 250 yards a game, he's scoring you 15, 20. You can start him. So I mean, he becomes a viable quarterback if he has one little game where he throws for 3 touchdowns. All of a sudden, the hype goes, and so at the end of the day, Bo Nix is going to be given a chance, certainly to fail, but also, I mean, even when quarterbacks fail, I mean, unless they're absolute dog shit, just absolute bottom of the barrel, they still are usable fantasy assets in superflex leagues. So in a single quarterback, I'm not interested in Bo Nix really at all, because I don't think there's immense upside. It's certainly, maybe late, I guess, if I need a quarterback back of the bench. I don't even know if I'd ever draft him, but in a super flex, he's very, very valuable because, look, if there's 12-team league, I don't need to do the math. 2 quarterbacks each, that's 24. He just needs to be a top 20-ish quarterback for him to be actually valuable and startable on a weekly basis, certainly in his range of outcomes. So you gotta really prioritize Bo Nix, especially if you're a quarterback needy team late in that first round. Now,
what's a player that maybe you were on or you were off, but now you're really off? Your least favorite landing spot?
Well, we'll stick with the quarterbacks. I mean, Michael Penix. Boy, here's an old prospect who's an NFL-ready gunslinger, ready to go. You're like, come on, land just anywhere with a shot. And he lands someplace where I don't know if he's got a shot. So, I mean, Michael Penix is one. We can get there. But look, the guy I was not very high on, and I don't think he landed very well. At all. He lost some draft capital, and he landed in a spot where I think there's 2 better receivers immediately, is Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell is going to be behind Josh Downs and certainly behind Michael Pittman. And he's playing on a team that doesn't necessarily pose as a high-volume pass attack, and with a quarterback who I think is going to play a little bit more RPO, read the middle, not necessarily sit back there and pick apart the edges of the field. Maybe a couple deep shots here and there, but I don't think Adonai Mitchell has very much of a chance at all to be a volume play at the NFL level early on in his career at all.
Yeah, he's like that was going to be what I said as well. And it's also crazy because if you look at kind of where he was sandwiched between, if Cincinnati takes him at 49, he gains value. If Washington takes him at 50 or 53, he gains value and a chance to play immediately. If Pittsburgh takes him 1 pick ahead and they go wide receiver in the 2nd round, he's on the field. And then if he falls a little bit, Dallas Cowboys at 56, you're getting excited about.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's not there. And then obviously, guys like Braylon Allen, it's the worst possible.
I was never in on Braylon Allen. I mean,
sure.
I thought he was a 2-down grinder. I mean, yeah, obviously, even worse than that was Isaiah Davis, who I think is better than Braylon Allen, and he's drafted behind him. This must say something about Izzy Abanikanda. They can't like Izzy. They can't.
Izzy's done.
Well, he's done in New York. I mean, he's got to find. I feel like somebody should be calling the Jets. Hey, apparently you don't like this guy. Can we take him off your hands for a 7th-round pick? Sure, send him our way and see what he's got. I mean, he is explosive. He's young, but he's probably, I don't know what the hell. Yeah, he's certainly not liked in New York. Can't be.
Shout out to Jerry Jones. Offer a 7th-round pick for Izzy Abanikanda.
That's what I'm saying.
We would get a little hyped on. We get a little bit hyped on Twitter. We're gonna talk a little bit about our favorite day 3 players a little later in the show and some of our sleepers for your rookie drafts. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about 9 through 12. We're going to talk about the players you want to target at the end of the 1st round. We're going to help you win your rookie drafts right here on Dynasty Life.
Yep.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February and Dynasty Leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
Welcome back to Dynasty Life. Theo Gremminger with Scott Boulanger, a.k.a. Jax Falcone of the Undroppables, the Undrafted. I mean, you name it. You name it. And also of winning Dynasty Leagues. So we got you in the mix here today. The top 8 seems established. Now you're going to have one-off leagues where somebody's going to push.
How many leagues have you played in with me?
I'm only in one with you.
How many seasons have you played with me?
One.
Who won that league?
You took it down last year, but my team was absolute fire. We were right there at the end.
I just got lucky. You know that.
Yeah, it was fortunate at the end, but you had a nice roster as well. I'm sure
we also pulled off the best trade in that one. What do we trade each other? What do we do?
I always talk about the biggest flex in Dynasty is offering to swap first round picks. So we have a 2025 first round swap on the table right here. There's no way I was going to turn that trade down after I tweeted that out.
So ballsy.
You retweeted it. You would have said except with me.
Yes.
Or something like that.
Oh, fuck yeah. For sure. Yeah. You literally said it on air. You're like, the biggest flex is to do this. So immediately I heard you say it on air. I sent you the trade and you couldn't turn it down.
Can't.
It was so strong.
I'm a man of my word.
I loved it. It was so good.
So guys, we got to talk about these guys. So let's talk about 9. So let's say you're in most rookie drafts, super flex rookie drafts. A lot of leagues are tight end premium, even if they're not tight end premium. Brock Bowers is so insulated. He's in there with the big 3 wide receivers. And then we have the big 4 quarterbacks with J.J. McCarthy joining, May, Daniels, and of course, Caleb Williams. So 108 is done. That's the tier that's been difficult to get into before the NFL draft. Yes. Now it's really hard to get into. Despite Rome Odunze landing quote unquote poorly and Bowers, I don't mind the spot as much as you do, but he's still locked in.
It's okay.
Let's talk about 9.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what player, let's say roster averse here. What is your initial lean for the guy that you want to lean into at 9 overall?
So between Lad McConkey and Xavier Worthy are the 2 wide receivers that I would think have the best chance of hitting in the NFL. But I gotta look, if I'm on the clock at 9 and I'm co-managing a team with you, we're having the Bo Nix conversation.
Yes.
We are having it. And we have to have it because at that particular point, quarterbacks are so valuable. He's very likely to outscore those other guys. I mean, he's gonna have value going forward. I mean, a mediocre wide receiver, just a good one. Even Jordan Addison, what is he, a 5th round startup pick? But a quarterback can get up to the 2nd round value very easily, 2nd, 3rd round value, not even being good. Just a normal young. Look at Jordan Love, skyrocketed as soon as he has any modicum of success. So these guys can certainly elevate much more easily and secure your superflex spot. Look, I have a team. I think there's one where I have Mahomes, Dak, and Lamar or something like that. Boy, I'd have a hard time taking Bo Nix there. So it is a little bit team dependent. But I might also consider trading that pick. Hey. Guys, I'd reach out to some quarterback hungry teams. Hey, look, I'll slide back here. So really the answer for me is probably slide back if you can. Obviously, if you can't, you have to have the Bo Nix conversation. If you're just asking me for a straight player take, probably Lad McConkey for me. But I'd definitely consider Xavier Worthy. Look, Brooks, we can talk about Brooks and Benson. I think we're going to get there. They have to be in the conversation depending on the scoring settings and depending on your team's thirst for running backs. Maybe you're loaded at wide receiver. You've played a bit of zero running back and you're wondering, hey, Scott, is this an opportunity for me to be pushing the button on a Jonathan Brooks? Sure. Absolutely. So again, I think it is a little bit team dependent, but you got to also understand what you're getting with each of these players. Brian Thomas Jr. has all the ceiling in the world, but you may not have a ton of targets out the gate with that guy in that offense. Who knows? You got, Evan Engram and Christian Kirk, never mind Gabe Davis, Travis Etienne. I mean, there's just other good players too. So I don't think there's necessarily an opportunity for him to step in a 20% plus target share. I think it's probably in the, 15% is going to be good for him with some big plays. But I don't think he's going to necessarily just be a player that's a high volume player out the gate with Brian Thomas Jr., which makes him a little bit hard to move or start. So if you're having a hard time either moving or starting a guy, what has he done for you at the 1.09? At least Nix you can probably move. Xavier Worthy you can definitely move. Ladd, I just think is going to be like the number one target getter on his team. So you start to break these guys down. You just have to play out the scenario of what you're going to do with this. I hear Scott Connor talk about this all the time is, what's the liquidity? What are you able to do with them 6 months down the road, even if you never plan to start the guy? That's the other thought process that I love it when Scott talks about this. And I think that's one of the most important things that you got to do in that spot is what are you going to do with this player in 6 months?
I think the liquidity argument kind of makes Bo Nix probably the play because starting quarterback utility is always going to be needed in Superflex. And, I would say like I have Xavier Worthy ahead of Ladd McConkey. You have Ladd McConkey ahead of Xavier Worthy. But I want both of those guys on some of my dynasty rosters. 9 though, I don't know. I might lean into Xavier Worthy because I think if you take a pure upside stance here, let's go position averse.
That's fair.
We saw what Patrick Mahomes can do with a really, really, really fast guy. Yeah. And it's run away from, to keep it in the simplest of terms, like he's different than Tyreek Hill. But in terms of like being able to run away from NFL defenses, he can do that.
Yep.
And it's the first time Kansas City's drafted a wide receiver since 2011. And they go ahead and they draft Xavier Worthy, despite getting Hollywood Brown. Seems like sort of a little bit of some of their skill sets are superfluous at this point. But I think it's just because Worthy they're so bullish on. So I don't know. I think if it's a swing for the fences argument at 9, and I want to go for the best possible fantasy outcome, I think it's Worthy ahead of Nix and ahead of Ladd or Brian Thomas or certainly the running backs. So we're both into
but because we're having that conversation, you should really be willing to give up. If you're like in love with Xavier Worthy, okay, whatever. But you really should be maybe in love with the process there that let someone else decide. If I'm at 109. Maybe I sell back, especially if I'm quarterback stacked. Hey, let me see if I can pick up some future capital, maybe another second round pick in 25 just to move back. That's not crazy. If I move back 3 or 4 spots and I pick up a second, why not? You were going to take Bo Nix anyway. He doesn't do any good on your roster. So at least take the profit today as opposed to drafting Nix and then trying to figure it out later. Hey, take the profit right away, move back. And if they still don't take Nix and he's still there for you, maybe you get to trade back again. So, these opportunities I'm always looking to trade back. I'm always looking to field conversations while I'm on the clock to make a trade. So yeah, absolutely.
And let's talk about like, how big do you think that most managers are treating that tier? Because you talk about the trade back, but it's always like league specific. There's always like sort of micro tiers because certain things are going to be more valuable to me than you, depending on our roster and our conviction on these players. But I think right now the general consensus is it's those 3 wide receivers with Bo Nix, and I would throw Jonathan Brooks in there. Am I misreading it? Is it sort of that 5? Right. Okay, yeah, I think that's about right.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think Brooks tends to be the running back 1 overall, although maybe it's going to come up here. I know it's on the show sheet, but I don't know if I'm bearing the lead here. But I think Brooks and Benson, 1A, 1B. I prefer Brooks, but it's not like, oh my God, I can't believe you have Benson over Brooks. What an idiot. No. That's a reasonable take. So, be ready to be wrong. And maybe Benson ends up being the better NFL player for sure.
Well, let's stick with that one. We'll get back to the wide receivers, but I had Benson as my RB1 heading into the NFL draft. The landing spot's incredible. I also like the Jonathan Brooks landing spot because we saw how Rashad White thrived under Dave Canales with all the volume, the receiving work. It's sort of like, and Carolina's also just begging for someone to grab that offense by the neck and say, this is the focal point of the offense. We are a Jonathan Brooks offense, and Bryce Young is just going to have to be sort of a game manager with improved weapons, but certainly a somewhat limited starting quarterback. So I think Brooks sort of takes the heat off of Bryce Young. They can play defense and they can utilize their running back. But I'll say this, I think Brooks outscores him in 2024. But if we were going to pick one of those two players, which one of those guys would be a second round pick in redraft heading into 2025? It's Trey Benson. Trey Benson as the starting running back in that Arizona offense, as long as he flashes and does well as a rookie. Now, he could take the job completely from James Conner midway through the season, but let's say he's just good. It's not quite David Johnson level that we saw David Johnson years ago, but in terms of if I get this starting running back on a Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride offense, I mean, you see where some of these guys are ending up now in redraft in best ball. I think Trey Benson is going to be like, I know I'm going to have like probably, I think an RB1 in redraft rankings in 2025.
Yeah, I love Jonathan Brooks, the player. I hate the spot, really. I mean, I do. I mean, it's fine. There's an opportunity there, and Canales, sure, all that. But, I mean, this offense is awful. This organization is awful. I mean, you see the owner, Tepper, taking off this fucking guy's hat and shit. Like, I don't know. I mean, that's not like why Jonathan Brooks will fail or succeed, but it's just the organization is dog shit. They draft the stone worst first-round wide receiver they could have drafted, like literally in the last 20 years in Xavier Legette. I mean, this is not a first-round player, not a first-round profile. The odds that he hits is almost nothing. I mean, I know people hear that and think I'm stupid, but it's just mathematically that's the case. I mean, anybody who has any sort of a wide receiver model or anything resembling any sort of analytic look at wide receiver profiles, this is the worst one they've seen in so many years. It's just awful. So they have that Mingo. It's just an awful run organization. They shouldn't have even drafted Brooks. They should have been drafting other types of support players for this team, whether it be offensive line, etc. So Brooks, for that reason, I'm a little bit skittish. And Benson, as you point out in that offense, could be a dog. And by the way, I don't think James Conner's ever been injured. So maybe. Oh, he has? You say?
He's missed time in every single season of his career. He's missed some time.
You don't say.
So, you're off on your research is incorrect on the James Conner not missing time. We're gonna have to go through his stats and all that sort of stuff after the show. But yeah, interesting. You bring up the Xavier Legette pick, and he's certainly not a guy that we're going to talk about as a big target of either of ours. But it's sort of like it's just like Carolina cannot get out of their own way. They go Terrace Marshall. SEC wide receiver in the second round. Then they go Mingo last year, SEC wide receiver in the second round. And then they go SEC wide receiver this year. They sort of these big outside wide receivers in the SEC. They're like, they're like kind of not quite SEC country. They're technically ACC country, but they're close enough. It's funny. It's just like these guys, they just can't help themselves. They go for this sort of guy. I mean, I'll have some Xavier Legette just because I don't know if you've been doing a lot of these mocks now, but he's a late first round pick that's sliding into a spot where I can take him, and if I miss, it's not going to kill me.
I mean, so if
I would bet on him missing as well, but I'm saying just if talk about getting a first round wide receiver in the third round of your rookie draft because everybody universally hates this pick. I think it's worth a shot. And it's probably going to come back to burn me, but I mean, you've seen him slip into the third round. I've seen him slip to the 2-3 turn, which makes me think if you do enough rookie drafts, you'll do it. Now I've seen a couple of websites
I think he's pushing.
Him.
He's the guy that pushes other good players to me. I love him. I love Xavier Legette. As a matter of fact, Xavier Legette, go out and draft him, pick him up early second round. You clip this, and put it out on the socials. Get Xavier Legette on your team. First round talent. Absolute stud, runs like the wind, built like a brick shithouse. Get Xavier Legette.
Let's talk about two players you didn't. So right now we talked about Xavier Worthy, Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., both running backs, and Bo Nix, in somewhat of their own little tier there. Are you comfortable with that being the tier?
Yeah. Are you?
I think I am. I'm going to talk about a couple guys that are not in there. I think I like Keon Coleman more than you do. Keon Coleman, and then let's talk about Penix. Let's talk about Penix real quick in just a sense.
We have to.
Okay, so Michael Penix, let's take it step by step. If you're a Kirk Cousins dynasty manager and you have Kirk Cousins, do you feel the pressure to go and get Michael Penix in your rookie draft sort of at cost, just in case, and sort of because you're already sort of pot committed here? Does that sort of influence you? Like, is the Kirk Cousins manager the one that should be embracing Michael Penix?
Yeah, I'd feel more comfortable because then at least I know if, Cousins just absolutely is awesome for the next 3-4 years, then it was Penix insurance. But if somehow or another Cousins flames out, hurts himself or whatever, at least I've got that, that the escape hatch. So yeah, I think that's fair. I think he is got to be considered, in that mid-second round at some point. Depending on your league build, depending on your roster build, depending on a lot of things. But I think, yeah, you're right. If you've got Kirk Cousins in your quarterback 2 slot and not much behind it, kind of a good way to secure, some insurance, right?
Yeah, and I think also if you're in like pure rebuild mode, it's like a free ticket because I can get this guy that I've really no pressure to win in year one. These things sort of, I will say the one thing with Penix is, when you put that sort of draft capital in a guy, Cousins better be good and they better win games because there's going to be, it's like when we saw the Jordan Love situation, they drafted him like after pick 15 and we see Lamar Jackson end of the first. We see Jalen Hurts in the second. So the sort of the wait and see quarterbacks, none of them were drafted 8 overall. And then you find out that internally in the organization, Penix was their second-rated quarterback, which is just crazy to me to have him ahead of Jaden Daniels in an NFL front office. But I mean, neither one of us are evaluating NFL quarterbacks.
I probably would have had him ahead of Jaden Daniels as an NFL prospect, not as a fantasy prospect, but just as if I have to win a game in the NFL tomorrow, I'd rather have Penix.
Well, I'm talking fantasy too, so I like that fantasy goes into there, subconsciously. Jaden Daniels, I don't know. I think Jaden Daniels is a whole nother show.
Here's the thing, Theo. Theo, here's the question. Just what are the odds that the guy busts in the NFL? Like, if you start him tomorrow, what are the odds he's Zach Wilson, Josh Rosen, Trey Lance? What are the odds that he's just like, not good, can't do it, can't get it done? Like, that has nothing to do with athleticism. That has nothing to do. I had a tweet. I'll share it with you. What makes a good quarterback? How do you identify him? It's like, it's none of the stuff that we can measure. It's all the stuff that we can't know. How good is he at reading defense? All these things. I have a big, long list. And it's like, how fast Jaden Daniels is irrelevant. How fast is Brock Purdy and Tom Brady? These guys, I mean, it matters so little. How about Phil Rivers? Did he look like, I mean, do you know what I'm saying? In other words, these guys, these competitors, they go out there, they read defenses, they play the game, they're on time, they're not making mistakes, they're limiting their downside plays. One thing with Jaden, 81% of his pressures resulted in a pass attempt. Yikes.
There's some bad stuff out there. There's some bad stuff out there for sure.
He's bailing and scrambling. He's got some bad habits. I'm just saying that does not play in the NFL where the linebackers and safeties are fast, where they can then judge those tendencies and just eat you alive. You have to be able to make the next chess move in the NFL. It's just the way it is against these, defenses even in the SEC. I don't care where you're playing. There are some 4-7 corners. You know what I'm saying? There's some 5'1" linebackers that just can't catch you. That there's just so many advantages that you can take physically at the college level that you can't. That's why I'm a big JJ McCarthy fan. I just think I don't know if he's going to pan out. I don't know if any of these guys are going to pan out, but I just think if I were betting on a player to be able to figure all that shit out, the guy who's figured it out at every level so far has been JJ McCarthy.
Let's go back to the second round here. So when we're talking about tiers, I think we can both agree that getting into the top 8 is a smart thing for you to do. If you have the opportunity to do that and your league mate doesn't understand the value of the top 8, or maybe they have a kind of a wider tier, it's not going to hurt you to get one of those guys or exposure to taking them. Then we would say sort of our next tier would be kind of the 9 through 14 tier, which would get you Knicks.
That's right.
Knicks. So we want you to get into 9 through 14 or 1 through, if you can't get into 1 through 8. Let's say we get through those guys. Let's say, Penix we've already discussed him. Keon Coleman is sitting there sort of in his own little mini tier. Will you have much Keon Coleman?
No, but I love what you said here. The tiers. I think there's a top 3, right? There's a top 3 in my opinion, maybe, and then a top 8 or 9, as you put it. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is very likely to go like somehow ahead and push 9 to be valuable, maybe ahead of JJ McCarthy and things like that. I think 9 could be a tier based off of a Xavier Worthy or a Brian Thomas Jr. or someone like that might vault into the top 8 sometimes and push one of those top 8, whether it be Bowers. I've seen Bowers fall a couple times here. I've seen Bowers outside of, it might have been Matthew Berry or something like that. Like a big account Dynasty rankings had Bowers outside the top 10 or 12. I was like, whoa, dude, craziness. So Bowers is getting pushed a little bit because of that landing spot. I think people are overreacting to the landing spot. I don't like it, but I'm not putting him out of my top 8 either. So I think you're right. It's like top 3, top 8 or 9, top 14. I think Penix is that pendulum player at that point where you have to make a decision, because then it's a very flat curve. I actually put the next one to like top 32. After that, it's a lot of – that's where I think you're going to win it, is outside the top 14 or 15. It's just going to be picking the right guy after that. Don't you think?
I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of value. I actually think that trading in, getting those, like, let's say 305 and in type guys, like getting that mid-third to end of second round guys, a lot of times it's like trading for those thirds. Sometimes it's just a wasted pick, and you're better off sort of holding on to that future whatever pick you need to get in there. But yeah, I think that this year's draft has a lot going for it now. Let's talk about your favorite targets. So we've gotten outside of sort of the clean and easy to rank guys. We're talking about your 15 through 32. Who are your favorite guys to draft in that range?
Well, I'm going to spoil the model a little bit, but for me, there's 2 wide receivers that will be heavily owned by myself and many of my brethren who worked on the Chalk and Wiz and Coder especially, is going to be Troy Franklin and Jermaine Burton. Those are 2 players that, score exceptionally well in the model and actually have a pretty good landing spot. Troy Franklin got crushed by the draft. I mean, really, really bad. But he ends up landing in a bucket, very, very similar score in the model to 2 players who also fell in the draft, Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm not saying that Troy Franklin will become those types of players, and Tank Dell, by the way. Those 3 players score very similarly insofar as pre-draft, they were very, very high. The draft brings them into a spot where there's still a very, very high score in the model based off of, just what they were as college players, and maybe the NFL missed. Maybe the model's missing Troy Franklin. Maybe we're wrong. We're ready to be wrong, but he does score very, very similar to those players. And Troy Franklin at value is falling. So you can get him, 2-3 turn almost every time. So we disagree vehemently with Matt Kelly on Troy Franklin. And we think Troy Franklin is an absolute must add in your rookie draft. Jermaine Burton also, who, look, he's got a lot of upside. I think you can start to look at guys like Jalen Polk and Javon Baker as well, just because of opportunity. We really like Javon Baker. He might have been a little bit hidden from plain sight insofar as that he transferred a couple times. And who knows, if things would have worked out a little bit different for him over the course of time, especially at Alabama, could have been a little bit of a different situation for Javon Baker. He unironically thinks he's the best player in this draft. He's going to walk into New England thinking he's the best player on that field, and he might be. And for that reason, he could end up with a target share that really matters. One of those 2 guys is likely to get a target share that matters between Polk and Baker, so you can take shots on them as well. I like that.
So that's an interesting one, and the New England Patriots are certainly your team when it comes to your NFL fandom. You're living and dying. I like how they drafted both of those
mostly
guys
right now. Dying
most of those guys. But things could have turned out a little bit different for you. It could have been a Lad McConkey is a New England Patriot if they didn't make that move down, which would have been a cleaner approach. And apparently they tried to trade in to get your least favorite wide receiver, Xavier Legette. So a big range of outcomes. They could have had your favorite wide receiver They could have had your least favorite wide receiver. They get two guys you're sort of excited about. I think it's interesting because Baker and Polk are different. Baker has a bunch of 50-plus yard plays last year. I think he had 5. He's a big play guy. And Polk is like your classic, in a lot of offenses, projects to be like your classic wide receiver 2 in the offense. He's got good hands. He's got good size. Doesn't project to ever be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. But it's sort of a double bet. We've seen this before where teams will draft 2 guys in the same position and one really hits and one doesn't. But a lot of times it's the second guy drafted. Mark Andrews, Baltimore Ravens with Hayden Hurst. I mean, you see it sometimes. So it's interesting. They could technically play together, or one's going to run away from the other. I think that's a very interesting one. You brought up Jermaine Burton. We love seeing the guys that sort of fall a little bit because of, maybe off the field stuff. 6 schools in 8 years for him. Georgia coaches, Alabama coaches, apparently bad-mouthing him a little bit. But the guy can absolutely play, and he's got the path to be the T. Higgins replacement in 2025. He could have a huge, huge leap forward. Any other guys you really want to circle sort of in your targets when we're talking about round 2 and round 3?
Well, Ben Sinnott.
Ben Sinnott, okay.
Yeah, if you're playing tight end premium and you're like thinking, okay, I want to make a move here, I think Ben Sinnott is a great player. I think we might have been able to get to him a little later too. But yeah, I think that he's a player that you can definitely draft. Because here's the thing, like you point out the top 14, then Michael Penix. And then I just have a bunch of wide receivers right now in that like next group, which is like, the Keon Coleman's, the Jermaine Burtons, the Polks, the Franklins, even Roman Wilson. You got to put Ricky Pearsall in there. I mean, I know a lot of people will have him, at right there at 14, 15. I don't know that I'm ready to take him there. I guess I'd just rather, trade back if someone wants Ricky Pearsall. So in that 14, 15 slot, when I'm forced to make a decision between those guys, that's specifically when I'm looking for someone who loves someone. I want to find a romance, and I want to sell on that romance at 15, pick 15, and I want to move back and let someone else, make a choice, because I don't see a big difference between these players in terms of range of outcomes and potential to hit as an NFL prospect. Someone will, someone won't. I just don't know which one. I'll let someone else choose, and I'll move back. Our model likes, Burton and Franklin, but it's not like they're heads and shoulders, ahead of all these guys in terms of value. They're probably going to be there in 5 to 10 picks generally anyway. And then you also have a big group of running backs, I think, too. So, that's why I think it's a really big tier, and it feels very flat, because do you like Jalen Wright or Corum or Marshawn Lloyd or Kimani Vidal? I don't know. I think that's where those are the guys. But even Tyrone Tracy, Will Shipley, Ray Davis, those guys are all in a tier to me that could find their way on the field. So when you talk about all those guys, what's wrong with just taking Ben Sinnott, who probably is a tight end who can play, especially in tight end premium? I think that's where you can push the button on him, just depending upon your league's thirst for tight ends.
Ben Sinnott, I took 17 overall in a tight end premium draft yesterday at Solid Truth. I'm completely with you. Like, we have him. I think pretty much everyone's going to, unless you're ranking incorrectly, he's like a top 15 to 20 dynasty wide receiver. I mean, dynasty tight end right now. And all he's got to do is flash, and he's like tight end 10 this year. Yeah. So we've seen sort of this archetype, the 6'4", 250, 6'4", 245 guys. They're all producing. It's sort of the new archetype in the NFL, the Laportas, the Kincaids, the Trey McBrides. I mean, I've been saying this to a lot of smart people, and I think it's sort of the change in the guard. Sinnott right there, incredible combine athletically. I think he
can
really,
block
really strong
too.
Pick. Can block too.
Nobody talks about it, but that's going to keep him on the field. I think he's not like the best blocker of all time, but he's enough where he can play. He's a 4-down player.
Let's talk about Kimani Vidal, because you hit on a bunch of running backs that I think are interesting. But when you get a guy like Kimani Vidal, it's sort of like everybody likes him. It's not like you're not going to find somebody that's like, oh, I don't. A lot of people like Kimani Vidal heading into the NFL draft. Yeah. Then he, goes in the 6th round, so that's not ideal. But it's absolutely the nuts landing spot. Yes. So you're talking about a 6th round running back. Yeah. But one we like going in, and not like some bad athlete. This is a guy who's a really good athlete. Yeah. 1,600 receiving yards, very high speed score. Yeah. So his speed score is not where Jalen Wright, Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd was, but right after those guys better speed score than like Blake Corum.
Yeah.
Really, really fun player. But where are you comfortable drafting him? Because I'm always at this point where last year we saw like the Chase Brown steam up. Good. If you took him, you're not like you're feeling pretty good about that selection. But at the same time, you saw like some Zach Evans steam. And Zach Evans was like, 7th rounder, but he lands in a spot where you're like, okay. So Kimani Vidal, like, I like him. You like him. I know that Thor Nystrom loves him. There's a lot of smart people on him. Yeah. Where are you comfortable taking him, using your draft capital on him?
Look, the draft capital sucks. I mean, it's awful. 6th and 7th round is like the worst. It is awful. I was so hoping he was going to get late 4th. Somewhere, I've been saying it so often. It's like 4th round, 5th round would have been fine, but for him to slip all the way to the 6th is really not good. All that being said about the draft capital absolutely nuking him, you're right. He lands in the perfect spot. Run first team with not much ahead of him. Dobbins is obviously an exceptional talent, but his wheel's been broken a few times. So he's got some broke wheels. And so you got a guy with broke wheels ahead of him, and Gus Edwards. So, I mean, it's not like you've got anything too difficult to climb. I think he makes the team. I think, first of all, everybody loves him. And then you get a guy like Harbaugh. I feel like he's going to absolutely love him too. I think it's going to be an absolute match there. Excuse me. I heard, I think it was the GM talking about Kimani Vidal, and he was basically just singing his praises up and down. I think he's going to win over, the locker room in terms of players and coaches alike. I'm comfortable taking him anywhere. Look, he's my RB6 in the class post-draft. So I'm happy to take him as soon as – look, once Brooks and Benson are off the board, if you need a running back, he's a reasonable pick. How's that?
That's fine. So we're talking about – give a number here, though. Not just running back. Like, what's a comfort – like – you're starting to see him go in the late 2nd, early 3rd. That's a level you'd be comfortable taking a shot on, or would you want a little
early,
bit more,
right?
A little early. That's what I'm saying.
It feels a little early. I mean, I love him, so it's hard. I loved Ramondre. I loved Elijah Mitchell. I love James Robinson coming out. This is that player for me. Kind of missed on Izzy Abanikanda last year, but these are the players that I've sort of loved over the years that are a little bit later in the draft. I think, let's go with 2-3 turns a little rich, but why not? I mean, it's not like at that point, that's about where I have him. I have him as player 27 in my rankings. So that's close enough. 27. That's early 3rd is when I'd like to have to take him there, I guess. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Definitely exciting times. And it'll be very interesting. That's one thing that, whether I take him or not, that's one thing I'll be tweeting out. I mean, all these FFPC rookie drafts, it will be interesting to see, like, the earliest I see Vidal. I'll be hitting you up in the DMs trying to see if you're seeing any early Vidal picks as well.
You know what's crazy? Theo? I was just in this draft, and I had the 2 late seconds, whatever. It was a 16-team league, so it was a lot of, obviously quarterbacks are expensive, whatever. And I had 2 picks back-to-back, and crazy story to get there, but I'll tell you later. But I took Jalen Wright and Marshawn Lloyd back-to-back. And I had a 3rd coming up. And I was like, Vidal will be there. And he went like 2 picks later. I was like, fuck. I really wanted to get all 3 of them. But I couldn't push the button for Vidal over Lloyd and Benson. I still think that's the right play. As much as I love Kimani Vidal, I think I made the right choice there. It's super close, though. That's the point, is when I was considering those 2 guys, it wasn't like Vidal, oh, you're crazy. But that draft capital difference, it's a real deal.
And I will say one thing to kind of piggyback off of what you just said is, like, rookie draft ADP, it's wrong every year. This is not like some like wisdom of crowds thing where we have all this data on these guys as pros, like redraft ADP, and reaching 2 rounds ahead in redraft is insane. But at the end of the day, you have rookie drafts. Don't be like some slave to ADP. Perceived ADP.
Agree.
Go get your guys to an extent. Now, don't go nuts, but you're going to like your rookie drafts a little bit more if you have some of the guys that you really wanted to get, and maybe you take them a few picks ahead of where your league mates see. So I think that's the one really thing I agree with you. Like Vidal, Tyrone Tracy.
I like Tracy.
Benson Ott. Yep. I'll say Javon Baker has sort of a hive right now. Yep. Jermaine Burton has sort of a hive. If you want those guys, go
You're gonna have
and
to
get
pick
those
them.
guys.
Yeah,
You're gonna have to
especially
pick them.
Burton. If you're in a sharp league, we saw. I wanted Burton. I was when I picked Jalen Wright and Lloyd, I was like, Burton was there. I'm like, he's gonna fall because he's further down the ADP thing. You know, he's buried. Nobody's gonna see him. He's gonna just slip to me here. It's gonna be perfect. I'm gonna hit Burton and a running back. And he went a pick or two in front of me. I was like, fuck. And of course, it was Mark Mathick. He's sharp. He knows what he's doing. And I was like, shit. You know, so yeah, when you're playing with other sharp people, it's very likely that they're going to also not care about ADP and take the right choice. Maybe they're looking at our rankings or whatever, and they're like, yeah, that's the next guy. I'm not fucking around and trying to, you know, thread the needle and get him later. They're going to pick him right away. So you should do the same thing. Absolutely.
Okay, let's do a quick arbitrage trades / predictions. This is either a pivot down in your dynasty draft and I could trade from, you know, this elite player, get this other player who's a little further down in my rookie draft and bank a bunch of assets. And for some of these guys, it could be a king's ransom. If Caleb Williams is not the best fantasy wide quarterback in this draft, who is it? And is this a player you're going to you'd potentially trade down for?
I've been talking about Caleb. I just took him in a startup, quarterback 7 or something. I took him out of Burrow. It was
7,
close.
8, 7. It's 7, 8, 9. You have to rank him
So
7,
close.
8, 9. Yep,
so close. And it was me and Chalk together owning this team, and so that was a big play. And so I think Caleb's value is going up. I think I was hearing Josh Norris and Hayden Wink saying that. I think it was him, or maybe it was Ian Hartitz and Dwayne McFarland. I don't remember, but they were talking about how he could be a top 12 quarterback in redraft this year, like Caleb. And if he can hit that type of number, like where he's just really solid, I mean, he's got weapons out the wazoo. I mean, they can definitely, they should be able to put up points. I think he's going to the division, the whole thing. So I think Caleb right now is gaining value. So I'd be hesitant to sell unless you're really ringing the bell. Like I really want a big haul. One of the ways that you could do it is maybe to trade back to 6 or 7, but I'd need a lot. And then I could get a Drake May, or for me, I'd be targeting a JJ McCarthy. And if I could get the JJ McCarthy plus a lot, not a little, but plus a lot, I would consider doing that. Although again, I think that if you're trying to pull that off, the other manager is likely to not want to overpay you, and they're going to probably underpay because they're like, I've got this quarterback, so it's hard to do. So I think the value's not there in that move, but that's the guy I would do it for if the price was right. It'd have to be high.
An arbitrage play off of JJ McCarthy, I like that one. That also could potentially, that's also a potential pivot where I've drafted Caleb, and then I see McCarthy's fall into like the 107, 108. Potentially make some Godfather offer to that that manager while they're OTC. Very interesting one. Trading down from Williams to get Drake May or Daniels, depending on your league, could be like a little bit. You're not going to get as much of a haul.
Right.
Let's talk about running back. Let's say Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson are the two running backs that we are betting on to be the best dynasty assets and the best running backs to draft in this class. Who would be the arbitrage play? And I'll give you, for me, it's a kind of a similar bet to Benson, a running back that we think is going to overtake somebody. This one might take a little bit longer, but I think Marshawn Lloyd landed great.
Yeah.
Marshawn Lloyd could be the starting running back in 2025 and a handcuff plus this year. Explosive, lands in a great offense. How about for you? Who's a running back you would see potential pivot down to?
Is there one really?
No, not really. It's a hard one.
Some of these questions, I liked it because it really got me thinking, do I really want to do that? I think that a lot of them, when I was looking at it, is like probably a play outside of this draft, right? There's probably a play outside of this draft, and I didn't necessarily come up with too many good ones. It was the last thing on the show sheet, but I think some of these guys, it's like, look, if you don't like Brooks or Benson, but someone else does, maybe that's when you say, okay, what do they have on their roster? That's an old tired dog. I saw a really good trade. What the hell was it? Oh, someone had traded Zamir White for Derrick Henry, right? And I thought it was a good trade. I thought it was good. Give me Derrick Henry. And they were like, what the hell? Derrick Henry's 30. And I would just ask, how many seasons is Zamir White going to be awesome? If he's awesome this year, if that even happens at all. 1 or 2? Like, it's not like these running backs have long shelf lives, even if they're great. So, trading a guy who might be a 1-year wonder, if he's that at all, for a guy who's pretty certain to have some fucking touchdowns this year. I mean, right?
20 of them.
Oh, unbelievable. He's going to have some fucking touchdowns, dude, is okay. So, I mean, if you could trade the Brooks Benson pick for Derrick Henry plus, like, dude, you know, who knows what they would add on top, you know? I need to get younger. I mean, maybe you get a first for crying out loud. I mean, literally a future first. So, I mean, you could get a huge two-way go in that way, you know, Joe Mixon type of player. Not that I'm super into these guys, but you should be able to get a huge plus, almost your money back plus the back, if that makes sense.
No, I love it. And tight end's easy. You know, if you miss out on Bowers, Ben Sinnott is the best one.
There's a couple. Eric All is pretty interesting as well. You know, I think Eric he's sleeping a little bit. You had asked for sleepers. That's one. You know,
that's definitely a sleeper. Let's end with that. Give us a handful of sleepers. You've already given us several. Maybe expand on all. If you've got anybody else on your list, let it go, and then we'll close this thing out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I had a pretty long list of Jermaine Burton, Troy Franklin, which aren't sleepers, but, you know, and then Kimani Vidal, obviously I can't not mention Eric All. And the other one you mentioned is Tyrone Tracy. Look, again, we talk about running backs. Age matters. Like, this guy's like, I think he's 42 years old. I'm not exactly sure. You might want to check.
24. You flip that around.
Is that okay? Maybe that's what it was, the research there. But yeah, he's going to be 25, I think, before the season ends potentially. Look, that's old. But you're only looking for lightning in a bottle for a minute. And this year is that minute because they don't have much ahead of him. What is it? Devin Singletary? That's the mountain he has to climb? There's not even much of a backup player. I think it's Eric Gray or something like that. That depth chart is not so good. And I think he can find his way onto the field. He's going to be a special teams contributor. So he's going to be active, you know, on game day. So for me, give me all the Tyrone Tracy at value, especially because I think he's a third or fourth round, you know, rookie pick. And once you're picking back there, you should just be nabbing up all these running backs. You know, Ray Davis and Tyrone Tracy are among them.
Yeah, I love it. Let everybody know where they can find your work. This was absolute fire today. I got to do it again this summer for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Well, they can find my show, The Undrafted, right here on the Player Profiler Network feed. Easy for me to say. And then, of course, on the Undroppables Network feed as well. We've got a lot of great shows, brother. The Undroppables, I mean, you know, we brought on Wiz. He's doing a show with Dan Bradley for the Patriots. We've got a whole team series, Raiders, Cardinals, Steelers, Patriots, Jets, tons of teams. So if you've got a favorite team, just hop on the Undroppables feed and you'll find that. Also, Travis Seal doing his show with Wiz. Great show. We've got another Dynasty show coming out, Dynasty Underground. Keep an eye out for that one. It may be a couple weeks, but it's coming. And I just may be on it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Go check out the undroppables.com where you can buy the wide receiver model, the UN score. Look, you're going to love it when you get a chance to see it. It lays out all the data, how we got there, how we use it, how you want to visualize what it means. And we have all the classes, like I said, from 2018 all the way through this class. So you have some historical comps to see where other guys landed and what the score means in terms of who else was in that range and what type of players were in that range, what their hit rate is. All that stuff's in there. Ton of fun. Go check it out. It's $20. Just fucking get it.
Yeah, no, highly recommend everything you guys are putting out. Tons of sharp people over there. We're very happy and grateful about our relationship we have with the Undroppables here at Player Profiler. Look for both of our rookie rankings to drop before this weekend in our rookie guide update. Stick with me this week. Dynasty Life, I'm dropping 2. Get this one with Jax, and then also Scott Connor. We're going to do some more rookie draft strategy, talk about some rankings, talk about some tiers, sort of like we did here. Cody Carpentier is my guest on press coverage. And check out Sonic Truth from this week. We did a 4-round Superflex rookie mock draft. That was a lot of fun.
That you won.
I mean, I crushed it. Crushed it. It's no competition. But me and you are going to be in the streets soon in a rookie draft. That'll be a little more fun. We will see you back soon. And crush your rookie drafts this weekend. This is time to win some money.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you,
The people that get the site and get the show.